Good morning. Welcome to A Map for the Journey. Today we're going to make a plan. We're going to make a vision statement for parents so you will know how you've done when your child is an adult. We're going to call our plan a vision statement, so it will be your vision of the future, but it will also be a guide for you to use every day or check yourself periodically to see how you're doing and see if you're meeting your goals in parenting. Now, when we make a vision statement, we're going to be very concise with it. We're going to try to do it like a mission statement and do it in 1 or 2 sentences. That way it will be something you can glance at. We will be careful with the words we choose so that they will cover an array of qualities that you would want your child to have. So when you make this vision statement, the first thing you want to do is just list all the qualities that you would like your child to have as an adult. Some of these will be your qualities. Some may be some you haven't achieved yourself. So it's also going to be a good guide to say how you're doing with your own maturity. And so you can always claim the role of the adult in this relationship, at least until your children are adults. We want to be careful to realize that a vision statement is something you are going to assess your progress, your success as a parent. You're not going to use it to judge how your child turns out, because there's a lot of things you're not going to be able to control. So as you make these qualities and you put them down, make sure that these are things that you have some control over. When your children are adults, they may have behaviors or they may make choices that you really don't approve of. They may choose lifestyles not to your liking. But unless you failed your own vision statement, there are things beyond your control. And in one sense, that's really the kind of children we want to raise. Children who make their own decisions and create their own life as adults. But we just hope they'll stay on a good path. So we're going to give them all the tools they need as they go through different stages of development, so that they will have what they need to become a fully functioning adult that we can be proud of. Now, children will make choices that sometimes you wonder whatever possessed them to choose a lifestyle they do, or choose friends that they do, or choose behaviors that they do. But if you can look at the vision statement and you can see that you really have followed what you thought was your responsibility as a parent, you have no responsibility for who they turn out to be. Now, many parents will tell you, and this depends maybe on how many children you have, whether or not it will be something you will see in your family. But children have a lot of DNA that doesn't come just from the parents. And so they may make choices that you don't like. They may have behaviors that make it very difficult for you to be with them. And that doesn't mean you failed. If you've followed what your goals were to be a good parent, then you're not responsible for who they become. So when we put things on this vision statement, we want to make sure that they are things that you can control. So the best way to start out is just to make a list of all the qualities you would like for them to have, and then arrange those qualities into 1 or 2 sentences. And you can put it somewhere. Sometimes families post these, put them on the refrigerator so everybody can see it. This is what I'm working toward. Sometimes that works pretty good when you're dealing with teenagers that can be kind of belligerent and sassy and accusing. I remember having an argument with my granddaughter who was living with me for a bit. And she didn't like something I said, which was actually a true statement. And so she was in the basement and I was on the first floor. And she's yelling at me, "You think you know everything because you're a psychologist." And I said, "No, I don't think I know everything, but I know a whole lot about this, and you don't." And it was just a quiet moment. We've looked back on that time many times, she and I, and laughed, because when you're 15, it's really aggravating to have a parent figure win out on an argument. But there's also something that makes the child feel safe, because they want you to be the adult. They want to say what's on their mind, but they really want you to make the decisions. some of the things you don't want to put on your vision statement. When I've done this with families, probably 50% at least of the time, the first thing that they put on there is they want their children to be happy. That's one thing you cannot control. Your child, if that's what you're working for, you have a real good chance of having a 30-year-old child living in your basement, smoking weed and playing video games, and be happy as they can be. That is not something you have any control over. Your child's happiness will come from the joy that they take in their own life. It's not something you can give them, because once you go down that road, the more you try to make them happy, the more they demand from you, and you will never fill that void. Nobody can make us happy. We have to make ourselves happy. And that's one of the things that you want to teach your child, is they will know how to be happy. But you don't need to put it on your vision statement, because if you're following what you want to do as a responsible parent, if they can be happy, they will be. And if they can't be happy, you're not going to make them. The next thing you don't want to put on is something like, we want them to take over the family business. Well, maybe that's not what your child is going to want to do when they get older. And I've seen this happen in families where they get a job when they're a teenager in the family company, and they never get away from that job, and they hate it. We do not want to make that decision. That's a decision that our child will make themselves when they are an adult. Another thing is something like, I want my child to go to college. That's something you can't control. And you can look around you and see how many students went to college because their parents wanted them to. They didn't do well. They changed the major many times. When they get out of school, they can't get a job, and they party a lot. It's just not a good goal for you. It has to be their goal, and they will come up with that by themselves if you do the other parts. Another thing you don't want to put in is religion. I think people who follow a religion or grew up in a religion or practice a religion want their children to be the same. They want them to continue and have the family follow that religion. Many times in high school or young adult age and in college, children move away from their family religion. May say they're atheist. They may become an atheist. You have no control over that. However, generally when young adults settle down, they maybe get married and begin to start their family. Often they fall back on the family religion because they can see the goodness in it. Often they don't, because they don't see goodness in it, but it's their choice. That doesn't mean you failed. If your children don't follow your religion and you still attend regularly, it doesn't mean you failed. It means they made a different choice. And that's when we have to remember, we may not like what they do, but we still love them, and we want them to know that. So I've made up a vision statement that you're certainly welcome to use. I've used it with many families, and I usually work with them just to help them get a start. But if you want to change anything, that's up to you. But just remember, don't put anything on that you can't control. So let's look at the poster here, and I will go along and read it. By the age of 21, he or she will be self-sufficient, independent, compassionate, and responsible members of the community. Now, all of those things you can do. However, let's remember one thing. As you're going through this vision statement, if these are not things you do, your children are probably not going to do them either. Your children are going to model what you do. So if you want them to be self-sufficient, then you need to be self-sufficient. If you want them to be independent, then you need to be independent. Are you taking care of your own life? Do you pay your bills? Have you shown them that you can save money? And that you can save for something special, like a vacation or a special event. If you can't do that, you can't expect them to do that. You can't ask a child to do as I say and not as I do. You're teaching your children, even though you're not formally teaching them, you're teaching them by your behavior. If your behavior is to miss work because you're hungover, to drink on the job, to get fired, then you can't expect your child to be independent and self-sufficient. You want them to be compassionate and responsible members of the community. Have them respect other people. Compassionate means to enter the passion of another person, to enter the suffering of another person, to enter the joy, the passion of another person. You can't do that without communicating with them, without trying to walk a mile in their shoes to see what their life is like. You want to teach your children how to meet different kinds of people, to become a responsible member of the community. And they will do that when they see you involved in the community and you doing things. You taking food to the food banks, you volunteering, even volunteering to coach their sports teams, to participate in their recitals, to help out at school. Those are the things that are going to teach them to be responsible members of the community. So our second sentence is, he or she will embody physical, mental, and spiritual well-being, appreciate the value of hard work and education, and demonstrate responsible and respectful interaction with others. So you want your child to know how to take care of themselves physically. I think that's so important. And I think this will probably not make some people happy that I say this. But if your child is obese or undernourished, and many children who are obese are undernourished, then that's a parent's responsibility. It's a parent's responsibility to know that their child is eating good food at least 3 times a day. And it should be food. Many of the things we feed our children are not food. In fact, they're very toxic for our children. You can start teaching a child as soon as they start eating finger food to enjoy berries and fruits and things like banana and almost anything that they don't choke on. We know we got the information. It's so close to us. There are so many meats and so many things that our children should never eat. I know some of them are on the list from my veterinarian not to feed my dog. And I think, isn't that strange that I should never feed this to my dog? And yet so many people, it's one of the main ingredients in that child's diet. So we're responsible for that, and we're responsible to teach our child. We're responsible to teach them portion size. We're responsible to teach them how to eat and what to eat. We even are responsible to show them how to prepare food, but that comes later. Mental health, how to solve problems, how to manage stress, how to deal with depression and understand that, to get enough sleep, to have a bedtime, to have a routine. Those are all things that parents need to teach their child. Now, as an adult, if your child stays up most of the night playing video games and can't make it to work, if you've done your part, you have no responsibility for that. So spiritual well-being doesn't necessarily mean religion. Spiritual well-being means, how do you help others? How do you take care of the sick and the poor? How do you help people in your own family who are going through recovery? How do you treat nephews and nieces who may not have the same luxuries that you have in your life? How do you treat your children's friends? Teach them all of those things so that they are good to other people and they just become a really good person without harming anybody. We want to teach them the value of hard work and education. You don't have to go to college to be educated. I think we've always known that. We haven't always respected that. Many people self-educate and do very well. Many people are educated in one field. I remember when I was getting my doctorate, I was talking with a therapist and I was real concerned because I just didn't know how I was going to make it through the program. I had so many things going on and so many things happening in my life, and I said, I just don't know that I can do this. I don't know that I can get all the assignments read, and I'm just really complaining. And he said to me, look around. Look at all the other psychologists in town. He said, you're every bit as smart as any one of them. Remember, they're only smart in one area. And I thought, well, not all of them, but most of them, that's true. Just because you have a doctorate in psychologist doesn't mean you know what to do with your car. If your car breaks down, what's your next step? You don't always know those things. And we look to people who are trained and educated in things that we can't possibly do. And that's what forms a community. We want our children to also not be afraid to work, but parents often instill that in their child without knowing it. Like, instead of doing work with them, and I remember doing this when my children were very little, I would say, go clean your room. Never dawned on me that they had no clue how to clean a room. And then I would go learn to go in and clean the room with them, and we would make it fun. Then they were more apt to just keep their room clean. However, that's another one of those things. You may have a child who for the life of them cannot get things straightened, cannot organize. I think today we call them ADD. Too many things they're paying attention to, can't focus on one thing. They don't always grow out of that. If they have a true ADD diagnosis, they don't grow out of it, and they do it everywhere. So we have to offer them the best we can, get knowledge on how to address this with our children, and help them to learn how to focus. That would be part of helping them with their mental health. Mental has to do with how people think. And so we need to teach them to organize, to teach them to prioritize what's the most important and what's really not all that important. If we've done those things, and as we go, we check with this vision statement and say, am I on track? And when you do something that you know was really successful, give yourself a pat on the back. Chances are your child will never forget those moments. If you are happy with what you did, it means it's probably going to be there for the rest of his life or her life. At each stage of development, we can refer to this vision statement, and we can do certain things that will start easily. And at different stages of development, we can teach our child good activities that will teach them all these qualities we want them to know. And it starts very young. At 2 and 3, we start planting seeds that will grow beautiful behaviors when they're an adult. Parents so often make the mistake of waiting until their children are teenagers and are doing all kinds of bizarre things and talking back and acting out. Then they bring them to therapy, and they have to learn all of these things that they should have been learning at the age of 2 and 3. So you plant the seeds, and as these behaviors grow and develop, you can help your child to refine them. Also remember that parents are the first line of education. You are their first teacher. You teach them by what you say and what you do, and what you're trying to do on purpose. Purposely, definitely teaching them certain things. But you also teach them when you're not trying. I have a statement that I remember saying when my children were young, and I think it was New Year's Eve. And we had a couple over, and our children were probably the ages 5 to 15. And when the couple came over, they were surprised that our children were there. And I said, well, where would they be? Why would you not think they would be here? Well, it's New Year's Eve. We thought you would get a sitter so we can have an adult evening. And I thought about that for a little while, and I said, well, I don't know what your adult evenings are like, but our adult evenings are nothing we can't have our children there. Our children are well behaved and they're in their own home. They didn't have any interest in sitting out and talking with us. They each had their own activities going on. I really do believe that if you can't do it in front of your children, should you really be doing it at all? So is your idea of adult entertainment that you're watching porn or you're flirting with somebody else's spouse, or what are you doing? What's an adult evening? You know, I've never had an adult evening that I wouldn't have been proud to have my children there. So if your behavior is something you don't want your child to enact, then don't do it. You know, if you are not going to follow this vision statement, if you're not going to be that person that is physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, why would you want your child to be that if that's not who you are? So one of the first rules about the vision statement is you have to be the person you want your child to be. It's never too late. You can start. Many parents didn't really get the information that they needed when the child was 1 or 2 or 3. And they got it later. You can always make an announcement in your house. There's behaviors I don't like and I'm not going to put up with them anymore. So here's what I want us to be. And we're all going to do it. Mom, Dad, Grandma, everybody. This is the behaviors you're going to have. I made that statement several times in my home. I said, my home's going to be a peaceful home. It's going to be a loving home. There will be no name calling. Name calling is a horrible behavior. It's a mean, very narcissistic behavior saying, I'm better than you and you're nothing. I don't want a child like that. None of my children are like that. I don't like that behavior. And if it's going on in my house, children will be reprimanded and take the consequences. But if it's adults, they will be asked to leave. And I have asked people to leave my home. I remember one relative was coming in the front door and tripped over the threshold and tried to hold her glass of wine so that it wouldn't spill on the carpet. And I met her at the door. I took her by the shoulders. I turned her around and I said, you can't be here. You can't be around my children like that. Go take care of your drinking problem. I don't have that in my home. There's no name calling. There's no mean talk. There's no ugliness. There's no fighting. That's another thing we can talk about, fighting. I don't believe in fighting. I don't allow it in my home. I don't allow my children to do it. I never do it with my husband. We don't fight. So, there's so many things you can do with your child at a very young age. And our next episode is going to be, and I know this is a crazy name, but it's going to be called How to Raise a Narcissist. And we're going to talk about the behaviors of a 2 and 3-year-old, because 3 years old is a very narcissistic age, and it's a really fun age. But the child is the center of the world, so he thinks. And so we're going to help our children to understand where they fit in the world. So I hope you'll join me, and I would really appreciate your comments. If something I said spoke to you, or if you can add to it, or you can say it a better way, we'd love to have your comments. And also, we'd like it if you would subscribe and give us a like. Thank you so much for joining us. Be good to one another.